Hello and welcome back to Hobby Vomit. My name is Ian and I'm really excited to have you back for another one. So if you watched our recent playthrough of the Fantastic Four campaign by Design Hacker, I mentioned in that I would like to start doing more Marvel Champions content on the channel. The goal is not for the channel to become a Marvel Champions channel. This is just one of my hobbies and it's a hobby that I really enjoy. And so this is a way for me to contribute some of my own individual content to the channel to help kind of support the channel that Matt and I are both working on. So again, it won't become a Marvel Champions channel, but you might see like 1 to 2 videos of me doing solo play content that will kind of add to the sort of pedigree of what we've been able to produce with the channel so far. And I'm really excited for it. I recently completed my collection and I'm kind of itching to get to play with those physical cards because there's really nothing like playing with physical cards. Now, I know that TTS is really great, and personally, I love TTS. I mean, I make mods for TTS. It's given me an opportunity to play this game and play many other games with my friends, and it fills a void that it would be really hard to fill otherwise because webcam can be kind of annoying and difficult at times. And TTS just fits in really well and keeps me and my friends connected. So I'll always love it for that. But man, you can't beat playing with physical cards. Now, I know obviously this isn't me playing with physical cards, but this is a response to a question that Matt recently asked me, which got me really interested in something. This was in the aftermath of the Civil War announcement that just recently came out from Fantasy Flight Games, and Matt was asking about how much of that box is going to be PvP. Because if you read Reddit and you read YouTube comments and you read Discord posts, what you'll find is that there's actually a lot of the community that doesn't seem very interested in PvP. Now, me personally, I am very interested in PvP because I just like having new ways to play Marvel Champions. I don't want Marvel Champions to become a PvP game. I just like that we have other ways to play it. Just in the same way that I'm really excited about the Trickster Takeover massive multiplayer mode because it's just another way to play Marvel Champions, another way to use my collection. So now, do I want them to continue to maintain PvP moving forward? I don't know. But again, like if I get to use more of my collection for it, then for me, that's an overall plus. Just again, another way to play Marvel Champions. So that's kind of where that's kind of where I sit on the question right now. But what Matt is asking, and what I think a lot of people are kind of curious about, is again how much of this box is going to be for PvP. Because if you're not interested in PvP, or if you're not really going to be playing it for whatever reason, then whatever is for PvP in the box means that you're essentially buying something you're not going to be using. And if a lot of the box is for PvP, well, then you might be disinterested in buying the box, or you might feel a little bit bitter about the price tag on the box, right? You might be essentially paying $48 for a lot of content that you don't want. So I really wanted to dive into this question. It's just how I am. And so I started looking at the Civil War announcement and the information they gave us in that announcement. And I tried to break down what we could know about the box, what cards are in the box, and how much of that box is going to be used for PvP. Doing this, I also learned what the framework is for PvP that's going to allow them to maintain it moving forward. And I think that's kind of interesting as well. So I want to go ahead and preface this video. I've already sort of prefaced it with a long introduction, but I want to preface this video with 2 things. The first thing is that this is not a discussion over Civil War and the announcement they provided. There's already lots of content creators who have done lots of content, like hours and hours of content on that Civil War announcement. So we're not going to be going through it. We're not even really going to be looking at the cards. We're just going to be focusing on what might be in the box and how that box is going to be laid out. Now, if you've not read the Civil War announcement, you really should go do that because I'm going to act as if you have, and you might be a bit lost or confused as we go through this video if you haven't read that yet or watched another streamer or content creator go through that. So if you haven't, I'd recommend that you go do that now and then come back to this video to learn more about the box. Secondly, if you're the kind of person who finds a lot of awe and magic in opening up a brand new box and ripping off the plastic and seeing what's inside, then this video might dispel some of that awe, some of that magic. It might spoil a little bit of that experience for you. So what I want to do is kind of go ahead and answer 2 pertinent questions and then dive into the box to kind of show how I got to those conclusions and how I think the box is going to be laid out. And for those of you who don't really want the magic or mystery to be spoiled, then you'll be able to just kind of leave the video after I answer the 2 questions, but before I dive into the box. So as far as those 2 questions go, the first pertinent question is how much of the box is going to be for PvP? And from what I've seen so far, it looks like it's just going to be 26 cards in the box. They announced that the box will be 274 cards in total. So at 26 cards, we're talking about slightly less than 10% of the box being used for PvP content. So they are essentially just removing what would normally be used for campaign-only content and replacing that with PvP-only content. So again, about 10% of the box is PvP only, and the other 90% of the box is fully playable in your traditional way with Marvel Champions, whether that be true solo, X-handed, or multiplayer. You'll be able to fully enjoy the other 90% of the content, and you just have 10% that you never really touch. As for how they might maintain PvP moving forward, if they choose to do so, the framework they've essentially established is that any villain/leader can now participate in PvP so long as they have 4 basic set-aside cards that are peculiar to that or particular to that villain/leader. Now, this is not something that they have announced. This is just derived from what I've seen in the box layout based on what they've announced. Okay, and we'll dive into what I mean when we actually look at the box, but it looks like the framework moving forward is each villain/leader needs 4 basic set-aside cards that are PvP only. And so in order for a villain to become a leader, they would need those 4 cards. But if they do have those 4 cards, then it seems like it would be pretty straightforward to be able to use any existing or any future villain as a leader. So I could see them doing something like every so often we get a hero pack that, rather than having a modular encounter set, has like 8 cards, which will provide 2 villains with the set aside cards they need to become leaders, whether those would be, currently existing villains or some future villains we would get, or they might do something where they add a few cards into a box to make some of the villains available for PvP. But that's essentially the framework moving forward, is you would just need 4 cards per villain in order for that villain to become a leader, which really isn't that much in terms of the amount of cards that you might be losing because they'd be dedicated to a mode that you're not as interested in. So for those of you who are not as interested in PvP, the answers are essentially 10% of your box are not really going to be things that you use, and there might be hero packs or boxes moving forward where roughly about 4 or 8 cards in that are, again, PvP only, and these would essentially replace some modular encounter sets that you might get in the future. Now, we don't know that. They may just completely abandon PvP after this, leaving it as a Civil War gimmick, and that would be totally fine too. But I'm imagining that there probably will be many people in the custom content community that might try to, make some of those 4 basic set-aside cards for existing villains or some of their own villains. And it's kind of nice that it's actually not too difficult for the community to be able to make content like that to get existing villains or custom villains into leader positions. And that could be pretty cool. And maybe that's just a Marvel Champions community initiative and a thing that's just done by the community, and Fantasy Flight Games doesn't revisit it. I don't know. But that's essentially what I've observed so far. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and dive into the layout of the box. I've put together a spreadsheet for this. So if you don't want any of this spoiled for you, then this would be a good time to step away, because now we're actually going to really get into the layout of the box. And I'm quite surprised at what I was able to find. So let's go and start off with the beginning of the box. Normally with boxes that Fantasy Flight releases for Marvel Champions, the beginning of the box always starts with the heroes in that box. Now, Fantasy Flight in their Civil War announcement did announce that the 2 heroes in the box are going to be Tigra and Hulkling. I know there's some confusion over that. Personally, I think it's actually a really cool thematic choice. So Tigra is actually from Registration and Hulkling is from Resistance, but Tigra infiltrates the Resistance and operates as a spy, befriends Hulkling, they work together before eventually Hulkling outs her as a spy and they fight. So this is kind of a cool thematic inversion on what they've done in the past, because with past boxes, we've always gotten 2 heroes that actually work together to fight against the villains. Whereas now in this box, we have 2 heroes that work together, but one is secretly working for the other side, and they're actually opposed. Very much thematic for Civil War, and a kind of cool thematic inversion of the other boxes. So I think this is actually pretty neat. Also might be the case that they're using Hulkling to set up for a future Scrolls box, which I would also be really down for. and it just seems very likely that that's going to be the case. So anyway, we have Tigra, we have Hulkling, and in this box, they seem to be going registration content first. So that's why I have Tigra as the very first hero in the box, as we might expect that the first box card number would be Tigra. Now, if you're not familiar with how these card numbers work, basically every unique card gets a card number, and then if there are multiple printings of that card, then there are just multiple copies that contribute to the number of cards in the box. Now, they said there are 274 cards in the box. That's the total number of cards in the box. That's not the number of unique cards in the box. So the card numbers are certainly going to be lower than 274, since there are going to be quite a few cards that have duplicate copies in the box. Certainly all of the like aspect cards, or the vast majority of aspect cards, would have duplicate copies. So that's how this works. Now, if we look at heroes that have been included in boxes, what we tend to notice is that they have something like 3 to 4 unique events with multiple copies of some of those events, and then roughly about 4 to 6 ally support upgrades. So what I did with Tigra is I went ahead and speculated that she would have an identity card. That's a pretty safe one. Probably about 3 events is what I was thinking, and then about 4 or 5, roughly about 5 ally support upgrades that would be unique to her kit, and that would constitute her 15 identity specific cards. Now again, this is all speculation. There are things that are known, and those will be hyperlinked, but if there's no hyperlink, then it's not known. It's just speculation. But these would constitute her 16 identity cards, her 1 identity hero alter ego card, and her 15 identity specific cards. Then they normally follow each hero with the pre-con cards that are going to be included with that hero. Tigra was announced to be in aggression, so we'd expect her to be followed by aggression aspect cards. Now, if we look at hero packs and boxes that have been released, the aggression and justice aspects typically only get about 6 to 7 unique aspect cards in any given hero pack or box. There are a few exceptions. Winter Soldier is a very notable exception. He came with aggression and actually came with quite a few aggression cards, but mostly it's usually 6 to 7. Leadership and protection tend to be on the higher end at 8 or 9. Now, there is one kind of exception to that, which is that whenever a resource is included in an aspect, it seems to be tacked on. So what that means is you wouldn't really see 6 aspect cards of aggression with a resource aggression card. You would normally see like 7 or 8. Now, if we remember back to the core set, in the core set, they printed the Power of Aggression, which is a resource in the aggression aspect. And the art of that card actually features Tigra interrogating some individual, which is likely actually from this event. It's very iconic. So it seems like it would be a miss if they didn't reprint the Power of Aggression in this box. Now, to be fair, I do prefer that they not reprint cards because that means we get more new cards, but frankly, you know they're going to do it. And again, this one kind of feels like it would be a miss. So I'm expecting then that there's going to be roughly 7 aggression aspect cards, with one of those being the Power of Aggression resource. And pretty much always there are going to be 2 aspect allies. So we'd expect there to be 2 aggression allies, which would leave 4 other upgrade supports events that are likely going to have 3 copies of each. Okay. So then after that, we get into the basics. Now, normally what happens is they will include the classic basic resource doublers, energy, genius, and strength in both of the precons, but they're duplicates. So only one of the heroes actually gets the card numbers listed for them, and it's usually the first hero. So that's why I have energy, genius, strength listed with Tigra. And then after that, they typically get like 4 to 6 basic aspect cards. And I listed Tigra as having 4, and I'll explain why after we talk about Hulkling. Then after that, we'd expect the Tigra Obligation, and then the 4 unique Tigra Nemesis cards that would constitute her 5-card Nemesis set. And that's pretty standard for Nemesis sets. There's always the minion, a side scheme, and then 2 other cards, and one of them gets a duplicate copy to make a full 5 Nemesis cards. So that would give us all of Tigra's cards. So we would have her 16 identity/identity specific cards, her aggression aspect cards, which would include 2 aggression allies and the 2 copies of Power of Aggression, the 3 basic resource doublers, as well as 4 other basic aspect cards. And then we get into her obligation and her nemesis cards. After that, we would get into Hulkling. Now, Hulkling being a shapeshifter, I'm actually kind of expecting that he's going to be a bit more event heavy. I'm also thinking that he's probably going to have a 16th permanent setup card in his kit. And I'll explain why again after Hulkling. So given that, I'm expecting the Identity Hulkling card, the permanent setup card, roughly about 4 events, and then 5 ally support upgrades. After that, we would expect his protection aspect. That's what they announced him that's what they announced him as, and I'm expecting it to be again on the side of like basically 8 protection aspect cards, with 2 of those being protection allies and the other 6 being upgrades, supports, events, and things like that. And we're likely to get 3 copies of each of those. Now, I did go ahead and list that he would have the Energy Genius Strength because based off of a few different scenarios, I'm wondering if they're going to have 2 separate printings of these basic resource doublers, one for registration and one for resistance. That's probably one of my more outlandish speculations in this video, but it seems like that might be on the table. And then there would be 3 basic aspect cards, followed by the Hulkling obligation, and then the Hulkling nemesis set. Now, the main thing I want to point out here before we jump into a few different scenarios that might happen with these player cards is that they did show us all 4 leaders that are going to be featured in this box. So we actually know the card numbers of all 4 leaders. Iron Man has the smallest of those. He has the card number 59. All the other leaders have larger card numbers. And since the player cards all come before the first villain, that does tell us that there are 58 slots for player cards. Also, because we know quite a bit about the leaders and the modular sets, we can also determine that there are going to be 96 player cards in total. So with that information in hand, we can kind of break down what it might look like for us when we talk about the layout of these player cards. We're going to have 96 player cards, with 2 of those being identity cards, at least 30 of those being identity specific cards, 12 of those being the obligation and nemesis, which leaves 52 other basic aspect cards. Now, also, if my speculation is close to correct on the number of slots dedicated for the identity and nemesis cards, then we have roughly about 29 slots left to cover 52 basic aspect cards. Now, if we assume that I'm correct, that's a pretty big if, then we'd have 6 doubler resources, which would take 6 slots and 6 cards. Then I'm expecting, again, 4 aspect allies, which would constitute another 4 cards. They also do typically provide basic allies, and we're certainly going to need them because we're only getting 2 precons here. Now, I know that they're going to do 2 other hero packs, which are likely going to be Justice and Leadership. But if they only provide the registration resistance allies in 2 aspects, then Leadership and Justice really can't make use of them. So I'm expecting there to be 2 basic allies on each side for 4 basic allies with 4 cards. And then also they're probably going to provide us with some unique locations, like a hideout for registration and a hideout for resistance. So I'm also expecting there to be 2 basic locations. I already mentioned the Power of Aggression, which is a single resource, and that's a max 2, so there'll be 2 copies of that. And then that leaves us with the remaining aspect cards, which would constitute 10 aggression/protection cards and 1 basic. So that would be 11 aspect cards with 33 cards in total, leaving us unfortunately with 1 more slot and 1 more card. Now, it could be the case that 1 slot, 1 card goes to another basic location or another basic ally, but it would also be a little bit weird if the symmetry was broken. Now, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. Like, I could very easily see S.H.I.E.L.D. getting a headquarters and a prison as like a basic location. So I certainly could see that, right? And that would make sense. But also this slot card combination could be covered by the existence of a 16th card in one of their kits. And since Hulkling is a Kree Skrull hybrid, I could very easily see him having a permanent setup card that has two different sides, one side for Kree and one side for Skrull. So that is one way that this might go. Now, if we assume that they're not going to give us separate printings of the 3 doubler resources, then the way that we can make that math work out is, well, and this is just one possible way, is if we increase the number of unique cards and resources. So maybe we only get the 3 doublers, but we get a few more basic locations, we get a few more resources, a little bit less on the aspect cards, and then we're also going to need a few more identity specific cards. Personally, I think this layout is a bit more of a stretch. So I'm kind of expecting the Tigra Hulkling kits to maybe have 16/17 cards in one or both of those kits to kind of make the math work here. Or I'm expecting that we'll get a lot more in the basic slots, again, to make the math work. So this is kind of what I expect. But overall, while a lot of the layout here is very up in the air and very speculative, we can at least be confident that there's going to be 58 slots in the box for player cards, and that's going to constitute 96 player cards, with again only 52 of that being dedicated towards the basic /aggression/protection aspects. The other 44 would be, or roughly 44 or maybe slightly more, being dedicated to the 2 heroes, Tigra and Hulkling. So with that out of the way, then we can actually jump into Iron Man. Now, what we have here is Iron Man at 59, and then they did provide us some of the registration main schemes, like cutoff support and the negative zone prison, and those were actually listed at 63 and 64. Now, when I first put them in here, they actually appear first in the article, and I was very confused. I was very confused as to why the registration 4 card appeared right before the registration 8 card in the box. But if we look at the other boxes and we fill in the Iron Man cards, then this starts to make a lot more sense. Usually the villains are laid out in a box with their entire scenario set up. So they will be laid out with their main schemes, with their modular sets. Now, granted, usually main schemes are actually part of the villain set, but they are typically laid out with their modulars. So in this case, even though the main schemes aren't laid out, or rather don't belong to the Iron Man kit, well, it still makes sense that they would be included with the Iron Man villain set or leader set because they're going to be his scenario main schemes. Now, based on the announcement, they did say there'll be 4 main scheme 1s, 4 main scheme 2s for each side, and they're fully customizable, meaning you can swap any of them. But they also said there's going to be 4 scenarios in the box, which at least to me means that they're going to have 4 pre-crafted scenarios for us to play before we start, messing around with changing things out. So there does need to be a de facto main scheme 1 and 2 for Iron Man. And it looks like the Iron Man scenario is going to have cutoff support and negative zone prison as his main scheme 1, main scheme 2. Now, before we get into the other cards, one thing that consistently happened with all of the different leaders is that after the villain, there were 3 blanks. So Iron Man came at 59, followed by 3 blanks. Captain Marvel, 3 blanks. Captain America, 3 blanks. Spider-Woman, 3 blanks. Now, the first 2 of those, it's not really a stretch to figure out what that's going to be for. If we're given the Iron Man leader stage 1, then we should be given the Iron Man leader stage 2 and stage 3. But that still leaves a big fat gap on that Iron Man 4 out of 14 card. And that gap would be on every single leader. Iron Man 4 out of 14, Captain Marvel 4 out of 14, Spider-Woman, Captain America. And what makes it really, really stick out is the fact that the Captain America shield, which was shown to us, is actually a Captain America 5 out of 14. Like, if the Captain America 4 out of 14 card was going to be a part of the Captain America Encounter deck, then certainly the shield would have been the Captain America 4 out of 14. So this leads me to believe that that 4 out of 14 slot is actually going to be used for the scenario setup for each leader. So I'm calling that like the Iron Man scenario main scheme. I don't actually know that's going to be a main scheme, but I do think that it's going to be the scenario setup. So very likely it'll have some flavor text and then basically tell you which main schemes to choose and which modulars to choose when you're doing the pre-crafted Iron Man scenario for that registration fight, when you're playing PvP. And then maybe the other main schemes like Cut of Support, maybe they'll have some flavor text and some rules for what you do during PvP. But I think that each leader, the fourth card of their kit, is going to be a card that tells you how to set up their scenario. So we're going to have Iron Man with Cut Off Support and Negative Zone Prison as his main scheme. And then they showed us cards like Powered Gauntlets, Rocket Boots, Mark V Helmet, Mark V Armor. Now, there was a gap between Mark V Helmet and Mark V Armor, which tells me that that's probably another tech attachment. And then after that, we have a slot that could easily take 2 copies. In fact, I think it actually has to take 2 copies. It doesn't have to, but normally when they show us a card, whatever numbers on the card is the lowest of the numbers. So for example, if Supersonic Punch, which was shown to have the Iron Man 12, has a duplicate copy, then it's more likely that that duplicate copy is Iron Man 13, not Iron Man 11. And since Mark V Armor is 9, then we're expecting some other event or / treachery to have 2 copies and be the 10 to 11. So I'm expecting that to be like Repulsor Blast. And then we'd have 2 copies of Supersonic Punch, maybe 1, but again, it seems more likely to be 2. And then we'd have a 14th card. Now, what's kind of interesting is that they all also have blanks on the 14th card. And for all of their kits, it does seem likely that the 14th card is unique, meaning only 1 copy. So I'm kind of wondering if they're going to do like a minion / environment for that 14th card. Because again, these are leaders that are based off of heroes, which have hero decks. So it seems kind of weird if they don't get like a signature minion, right? Like it feels weird if we have an Iron Man leader who doesn't have like a War Machine in the deck, right? So I'm kind of wondering if that's what the 14th card is going to be. Now, granted, the recommended modulars are very minion heavy, but again, it just feels weird that it wouldn't be there. So I don't know, but it could be another treachery, another attachment. If it's a tech attachment, I wonder why it's not with the other Iron Man tech attachments. But yeah, it was also kind of strange to see that Powered Gauntlets and Rocket Boots, now granted they're plural, but they only have 1 copy. But for a villain kit, I guess that makes sense because it'd be a little too redundant if there were 2 Power Gauntlets on Iron Man. So it makes sense that they would call each one they would call it Power Gauntlets and only have 1 copy. But that's essentially the Iron Man kit. After that, then we get into Yellow Jacket. And because Yellow Jacket is 73, we do know the limits of Iron Man. It's going to be card numbers 59 through 72. And we do know there are going to be 14 Iron Man cards with those 2 registration cards. Now, again, the villain kits are usually followed by their modulars. So this tells us that Iron Man's going to have 4 modulars, which will all be registration modulars. And 3 of them are going to be Mighty Avengers, the Initiative, and Maria Hill. Now, the kind of interesting thing here is that they tend to have these sets with 5 cards that are all unique, and those tend to be pretty minion heavy, like 3 or 4 minions in the group. And then they have these other ones that are only like 3 or 4 unique cards, and then they're not very minion heavy. They typically focus on like 1 important minion, like the Maria Hill kit. Okay. Now, in terms of what these might be, we do know that we have 5 cards in the Mighty Avengers, and we were shown many different modular sets, and all of them have 5 cards. So I think that all of the 16 modular kits are going to have 5 cards. So they did show us Yellow Jacket for Mighty Avengers, as well as Mighty Avengers and Earth's Mightiest Heroes. Now, based on the art from Mightiest Avengers, I think I can actually pull this one up. So again, it's hyperlinked, so it should pull up the image. Hopefully everything works well. My internet's been a little bit funky. There we go. We can actually see Doc Samson here. And this is actually the old Ms. Marvel Warbird. And then if we go to the other one under Earth's Mightiest Heroes, we can actually see Ares in the back with Yellow Jacket right here. And again, Warbird. So there's clearly already a Doc Samson in the initiative. So I'm guessing that the other 2 will probably be Ares and Warbird, which kind of makes sense again with it being a Mighty Avengers, that there would be multiple minions in that kit. Then we go to the Doc Samson with the initiative. We have another one which has 5. And again, we know this because there has to be at least 5 slots. And we were given Maria Hill, so we know the kind of beginning and end of that encounter set. So there's got to be 5, and these tend to have 3 or 4 minions. So I'm guessing it's going to be Doc Samson. Well, I'm not guessing that. They showed us that. Hellcat, we know that one too. And then it's kind of curious because Doc Samson and Hellcat both have relationships to Gamma. So it kind of seems like there could be a Gamma theme with the initiative. But the initiative itself doesn't really have anything to do with Gamma. Also, notably, this is Civil War, but there are 2 Civil War events in Marvel. The first one is between Captain America and Iron Man. The second one is when Captain Marvel and Iron Man fracture. The initiative technically happens after the conclusion of the first Civil War event, yet it's a modular encounter set here. So that's kind of interesting. And so they might actually be bringing in themes from both of the Civil Wars, not just the first one. Either way, not really sure what the initiative is going to include, but one of the members of the initiative who also happens to be a currently existing ally is Marvel Boy, who actually is otherwise known as Justice. And then, of course, Black Cat is another member of the initiative, and that's also an ally. It's the signature ally of Spider-Man. So we might see one of those 2 characters, or we could see something completely different. Maybe there's 4 hero minions in this and 1 treachery. Maybe it's 3 and 2 treacheries. Again, don't really know. All we know so far is we do have a modular encounter set with 3 minions and 2 treacheries, and so this one might follow suit. Then after that, we've got 4 unique cards for Maria Hill. We do know about Maria Hill. We also know that her kit does need to include a life model decoy. Now, I'm kind of expecting there to be 2 copies of life model decoy because that's kind of her thing, followed by 2 other treacheries, but really don't know. We really don't know how these minion kits are going to fall out. And so maybe there's a 5th Maria Hill card and not 2 copies. Maybe there's 2 copies of something else. Don't really know. What we do know is that what we've seen so far from Resistance tells us that the Resistance has at least 5 modular sets that each have 5 cards. And the registration modular sets are a bit lacking on that front. Most of theirs contain 3 or 4. So because of that, to me, it kind of feels like this is more likely to be a 5-card registration module set to make up for how many of those kinds there are. Because again, I'm expecting some kind of symmetry between the 2, but I could be totally wrong. Maybe there's a lot of asymmetry actually. But if there is symmetry, then Maria Hill will have 4 unique cards, and then there will be another modular set from registration with 5 unique cards, which means it would likely be another minion heavy one. But again, who knows? Maybe it's a bunch of environments or a bunch of attachments, or, it is Iron Man, so it could be a lot of attachments to like tech out the other Avengers, and that'd be pretty cool. So now with that being said, there are some things I would wonder about. Like there are other groups that are featured in both Civil Wars, some of which are associated with Iron Man. And again, I'm also just still wondering about War Machine. Like, where's War Machine in all of this? Do we get a War Machine kit that happens to have 5? Is that going to be the 14th card in Iron Man? Don't really know. Either way, after that, we do get Captain Marvel. Like I said, we know where these start. So again, I'm expecting Captain Marvel 1, 2, and 3, followed by her scenario setup card. And then we do know that her main scheme 1 is going to be Shield Recruits, but we don't know what her main scheme 2 is going to be. Then they give us Energy Channel, Cosmic Flight, Photonic Blast, Crisis Interdiction. There's a gap there, so once again, I'm expecting there to be another attachment. Do ignore the underline on this one. I have no idea why it underlined it. I think it's because it's called attachment. So I apologize for that. This is an unknown card. The rest, of course, are known. And once we get to Photonic Blast, we're into treacheries that have 2 copies. So Photonic Blast, Crisis Interdiction, and Energy Absorption, we don't know. But I'm kind of, again, expecting the 14th card to be unique. And it would be weird for her Energy Absorption to be a single copy because it's so fitting for her kit. So I'm expecting that one to have 2 copies. And then again, for us to have a 14th card, that's a singleton. And so I'm expecting it to be, like again, a minion or environment. Then we do know that she's going to have the Cape Killers modular. The Cape Killers modular is going to have 5 cards, but we are going to get 2 copies of those unregistered supers. And then there's going to be the Shield Soldiers, followed by the Rapid Response. Now, there are going to be 3 copies of Shield Soldiers, so it's going to be a minion heavy deck, but it's a minion heavy with non-unique minions. So that's kind of cool. And then we don't actually know if this is going to be a 3-card encounter set or a 2-card encounter set, again, with multiple copies of those 2. But essentially the way it lays out is either Martial Law has 3 unique cards, and then we have a 5-4 split between the following 2 registration modulars, or it's a 2-card unique set, and we've got a 5-5 split. So again, if it's a 5-4 split, to me that makes more sense, because that means that one of the 4 would be based on a particular minion. So we could see something based on, for example, like Spectrum, or another like hero or ally that's very recognizable. And then we'd have some other 5-card set that might be like the Ultimates or Alpha Spaceflight or some kind of group of minions. And that would fit in really well with her kit, I think. Or again, it could be, some kind of set of environments, or who knows, right? But again, we're kind of looking at a 5-4 split or a 5-5 split. Now that actually concludes both of the registration villains, and then we get a gap. Now, it's not really possible for this gap to be filled by a modular set unless they just for some reason decide that 2 of the modulars have to be much larger. So I'm expecting that's not going to happen. Also, if they did, that means that we're getting significantly fewer player cards, and the math really doesn't work out on that. So I think what happens is we're going to have this 4-card gap, and that 4-card gap is going to be used for the 2 remaining registration main scheme 1s and 2 remaining registration main scheme 2s. Then we get into cards that we do know, notably the 5 standard PvP cards. And we should note that the 4th standard PvP card is a double-sided side scheme, which is kind of interesting because you basically get, like, for example, on the one side where there's the side scheme, 128A. This is loading really slowly today, so I apologize for that. I'm going to let this one finish, and then I'm not going to do this anymore. But this is a side scheme for registration. But on the back side, 128B, it's actually the 5th standard PvP card for resistance. Because the idea is that it's a bad card that you're working against, and then it flips into a good card. So it's kind of neat where you have the 4th registration PvP card turns into the 5th resistance PvP card, and the 4th resistance PvP card turns into the 5th registration PvP card. Either way, doesn't really matter. All that it really matters is that we're going to have these 5 PvP cards that will take up 4 slots because, again, one is double-sided. Okay. Now, then we get into this other set of gaps, but they did give us a few of these cards. And what's interesting is they gave us the first basic Iron Man card and the last basic Captain Marvel card, because that basic Captain Marvel card is immediately followed by Captain America. So these bookends actually tell us quite clearly that there are going to be 4 basic Iron Man cards followed by 4 basic Captain Marvel cards. Also, I did say I didn't want to do this, but I kind of do need... Oh, thank goodness, it loaded really quickly. So we do need to see this real quick because it says on it, remove this card from the game. Each player on your team chooses 2 of your leader's set-aside player cards. There are 2 possible players on the team, which would mean that you would need at least 4 of those leaders set-aside cards. So based on the fact that we have the Futurist and Raw Power and 6 cards in between, it makes sense that these 6 cards are going to be the remaining basic Iron Man, basic Captain Marvel cards to fill out their kit of having 4 basic Iron Mans, 4 basic Captain Marvels. And this is also what essentially leads me to say that there's roughly about 10% of the box that's going to be used for PvP. Because there are 4 leaders, and each leader needs 4 set-aside cards. So that's 16 set-aside cards that are going to be only used for PvP. And then you have your standard PvP cards. Now, I did say it's 26 cards. I guess technically there's actually only going to be 24 cards because each of the 2 standard PvPs has a double-sided card. The 4th and the 5th card are 2 separate sides. The only reason why they're labeled like 4 out of 5 and 5 out of 5 is because they are from different kits. Normally, if you had a double-sided card, it would be like if it's number 4 out of 5, each side would be 4 out of 5. But in this case, it's from one set and then flips into the other set. So I think that's why they listed one side as 4 out of 5 and the other side is 5 out of 5, kind of breaking a norm for them. But makes sense. So I guess technically it's only 24 out of 274, but again, it's roughly about 10% of the box is only for PvP. Okay. After that, we get into Captain America with the Captain America 1, 2, 3, and again, his scenario setup. We do not know what his main schemes will be, but then we see the shield. Again, I'm expecting another attachment because this 6th mark is blank. Now, I guess I should have mentioned this earlier. That 6th mark could be where the minion goes. So that could be the case as well. Then we actually know quite a bit about his, as well as also Spider-Woman, because then we have 2 copies for sure of Super Soldier Serum, 1 copy of Shield Block, 2 copies of Shield Toss, and then again, probably 2 copies of Heroic Strike with a minion/environment that would follow. Then we're going to get the New Avengers. The New Avengers has to feature at least Falcon and Goliath, and then there's this Freedom Fighters card. This one is an attachment that links back to the announcement, so this is also known. The only one that's not known about the New Avengers is going to be this 2nd card right here, which I'm expecting to be Hercules because he's actually featured in the Freedom Fighters art. If we look at this art, I'm assuming that they're loading quicker now. Bad assumption. So based on the art from Freedom Fighters, we can see that we have got Captain America up front and then Daredevil, but there's a Defenders Resistance modular, so we'd expect Daredevil to be in that. That's Hercules in the back, and then I believe this is going to be Falcon. Could also be Goliath. I'm not as clear on the differences in their art, but probably Falcon. And so again, if we look at the kit, we can already see that Falcon is there. Goliath is also there. So that would mean that the other character, because it won't be Cap and it won't be Daredevil, so probably Hercules. Now, I also expect that Hercules will be one of the 2 new hero packs that we're going to get. But since they already included Spider-Man and Maria Hill as minions, I don't think they're too concerned about there being clashes between minion modular encounter sets and heroes. That's actually kind of the point, right, for Civil War, is that there's going to be these clashes between heroes. So I do think that this is going to be one of the sets where we sort of have like the worst abuses of the uniqueness rule. And it's going to be really on us to kind of sort out what heroes and allies we bring to the table based off of what leaders and modular encounter sets we're using. Might be a little bit annoying at first, but I think it'll settle out in the end. And frankly, again, I'm really excited for it. I know that, again, people aren't as interested in PvP, but I do like that as the gimmick for the box. I think it's a better gimmick than campaign, at least for this box, right? So moving on, we do know that Captain America will have New Avengers and then Secret Avengers. And then after that, it's kind of up in the air. Now, I'm expecting that Secret Avengers will have 5 unique cards just because the other quote Avengers groups have had 5 unique cards. Mighty Avengers, New Avengers. So I'm expecting to have 5. Regardless, then we've got 2 more Resistance modulars, and it's either going to be like a 4-4 split or a 5-3 split. So if it's like a 5-3 split, then it would kind of follow along with like maybe another group, as well as then something that's like akin to the Shield soldiers. So that could be kind of cool. We could see something with like the underground resistance movement or something like that, where we just sort of have one of the resistance modular sets has a minion in it that has multiple copies and it's not unique, right? So, because that is kind of interesting with this one, right? A lot of the modulars feature unique minions, like virtually all of the minions are unique, which is really cool. And also, again, fitting for a Civil War, where a lot of those should be recognizable heroes and ally cards from other kits and from the game. And then after that, we get into Spider-Woman, who of course is going to have Spider-Woman 1, 2, 3, her scenario main scheme setup card. We don't know what her main scheme 1 is going to be, but we do know that her main scheme 2 is going to be Neighborhood Protectors. And then we've got Finesse, Contaminant Immunity, Pheromones. Then we have another card that's a gap, but it must have 2 copies. And so we've got 2 copies of Contaminant Immunity, 2 copies of Pheromones, 2 copies of some other event, 2 copies of Inconspicuous, and then again, Self-Propelled Glide. Now, the Self-Propelled Glide is what kind of gives us our biggest indication that the 14th card in any given kit is probably going to be something like an attachment or a minion, something that's kind of unique for that kit. Afterwards, we do see that we have the Spider-Man modular encounter set, which of course makes a lot of sense since it is Spider-Woman. And I'm guessing that he's going to have 2 copies of Tangled Up, but it's going to be a 4-card encounter set because after that we get Luke Cage. So it has to be a 4 unique card encounter set with 5 cards in total. And again, I'm sort of expecting that Tangled Up would be the duplicate copy, but maybe not. After that, we get the Defenders with Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, and then, of course, the card, the Defenders. And so I'm also expecting Iron Fist and Daredevil would be the other 2 cards. And then that leaves us with 2 more Resistance modulars, which both must have 5 unique cards in them. So I'm wondering if these are going to be, again, kind of based on a 2 to 4 minion set. And we might see things that are related to more Spider-Man, Spider-Verse, Web Warrior cards. Like, for example, I know that Madam Web also served for the registration and then left to go serve for the Resistance, much like Spider-Man. And again, Spider-Woman also kind of fills that role because she was a spy that infiltrated the registration. So I'm also expecting one of these to kind of be like a Web Warrior themed Resistance modular kit, and I think that will be pretty cool. And then after that, we see Rallying Call and Going Underground, which are 2 of our Resistance Main Scheme 1s, followed by 2 Resistance Main Scheme 2s. And then, of course, we're going to have the 5 cards for the standard PvP. Now, this one is not a stretch, but they didn't actually provide us an image for one of these. What happened was they had a side-by-side with 2 of the standard PvP cards to show us that there's going to basically be a registration set of PvP cards and a resistance set of PvP cards that are basically going to be the same, but they're just going to have different card art. They have different colors. And the one on the left was not featured in the paragraph, but you can clearly see the card number on it, and that card number was 203. So that tells us exactly where that resistance PvP set is going to be. And then that cleanly gets followed immediately by No You Move, which is a basic set-aside card for Captain America. And then pretty shortly down, we get the Double Agent basic set-aside card for Spider-Woman. And then I think that's going to complete the box. And so we'll have 214 unique cards in the box with 274 cards in total laid out like this. So this is my speculation over what's going to be in the box. I personally am really excited for it. I hope that this provides you all with some more information on what we're getting with this new box. And again, if you're not as excited about PvP, I think it's only going to be like 10% of the box. So really not a big margin. You're essentially trading a campaign for this PvP gimmick. But again, if you're not a big fan of that, well, as they said, there are a lot of different ways that you can mix and match modulars, mix and match main schemes, and you can even bring in modulars from your existing collection into this, right? The restriction on what modular you choose is only in place for PvP. So if you're not doing that, then all of the modules in the game are fully available to you, and you can use these modulars in other scenarios. And I am really excited for that. So anyway, hope that this has been helpful. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. If you'd like to make any corrections or see things where I might have gone wrong, please let me know in the comments below. I'd love to have a discussion more on this with you all. I hope this has been helpful. This has been Hobby Vomit. My name is Ian, and I'll see you in the next one.